Samson the Nazarite, a biblical figure who has captivated people for centuries. From tearing up a lion with his bare hands to tying up 300 foxes and setting them on fire. From slaying 1,000 men with a jawbone to toppling the Philistine temple. The story of Samson is a phenomenal and controversial outlay of events that have shown both the power of God and the dangers of having power without the character of God. In today's Bible study, we will be looking at the rise and fall of one of the strongest men to ever walk the earth. For proper context surrounding the birth of Samson, the Israelites once again perverted their ways and abandoned God's laws and commandments. Judges 2:11-14 says, "So the Israelites did what was bad in the eyes of Jehovah and served the Baals. Thus they abandoned Jehovah, the God of their fathers, who brought them out of the land of Egypt, and they followed other gods of the people who were all around them. They abandoned Jehovah and served Baal and Ashtoreth images. At this Jehovah's anger blazed against Israel, so he handed them over to plunderers who pillaged them. The Israelites' constant disobedience and refusal to turn away from their sinful ways angered the Lord, and he delivered them into the hands of the Philistines for 40 years. In chapter 13 of the book of Judges, we were introduced to a Zorah man of the Danite family called Manoah, who would later be revealed as the father of Samson, and his barren wife whose name wasn't mentioned in the Bible. Throughout the course of their marriage, their union was childless until they were remembered, or rather selected by God, to fulfill a higher purpose, which was to bring forth a liberator for the people of God to deliver them out of the hands of the Philistines. Manoah's wife was visited by an angel of the Lord, a messenger who came to inform her that she would give birth to a son. Events like these have occurred multiple times in the Bible, like in the case of the birth of Isaac in the Old Testament and John in the New Testament. But aside from the similarities, there was also a key difference that made Samson's case unique in a sense, if compared to other accounts. Judges 13:3-5 says, "In time, God's angel appeared to the woman and said to her, 'Look, you are childless, but you will conceive and give birth to a son. Now be careful not to drink wine or anything alcoholic, and do not eat anything unclean. Look, you will conceive and give birth to a son, and no razor shall touch his head, because the child will be a Nazirite of God from birth, and he will take the lead in saving Israel put of the hands of the Philistines.'" Manoah's wife was instructed by the angel of the Lord to raise the child according to the Nazirite vows, which can be found in the book of Numbers chapter 6 from verses 1-21. But for the significance of this story, the instruction given to Manoah's wife was highlighted in the first 5 verses of the chapter Numbers 6. 1:5 says, "God spoke further to Moses and said, 'Speak to the Israelites and tell them, if a man or woman takes a special vow to live as a Nazirite to God, he should keep away from wine and other alcoholic beverages. He should not drink vinegar of wine or vinegar of anything alcoholic. He should not drink any liquid made from grapes, nor eat grapes, whether fresh or dried. All the days of his Naziriteship, he should not eat anything made from the grapevine, from the unripe grapes to the skins. All the days of the vow of the Naziriteship, no razor should pass over his head. He is to remain holy by letting the hair of his head grow until the days of his being set apart to God are completed." Interestingly, the angel of the Lord instructed the woman not to drink any wine or alcohol, and not to eat anything unclean. That meant that the child was to be consecrated to God as a Nazirite, even while he was still in the womb. Manoah was informed by his wife everything that had happened, and the dialogue between her and the man of God. Then Manoah prayed to the Lord, asking for a second visit to confirm everything he was told. Judges 13:8-14 says, "Manoah pleaded with God and said, 'Pardon me, Jehovah. Please let the man of the true God whom you just sent come again to instruct us about what we should do with the child who will be born.'
So the true God listened to Manoah,
God's
and the
angel
angel
appeared.
of the true God came again to the woman while she was sitting in the field. Her husband Manoah was not with her. The woman quickly ran and told her husband, "Look, the man who came up to me the other day has appeared to me." Then Manoah got up and went with his wife. He came to the man and said to him, "Are you the man who spoke to my wife?" He said, "I am." Then Manoah said, "May your words come true. What will be the child's manner of life, and what will be his work?"
So Jehovah's angel said to Manoah, "Your wife should keep herself from everything that I mentioned to her. She should not eat anything that the grapevine produces. She should not drink wine or anything alcoholic, and she should not eat anything unclean. Everything that I commanded her, let her observe." After hearing what the angel of the Lord had to say, Manoah then pleaded with the man to stay so he could prepare a young goat for him. And the angel of the Lord said, "If I stay, I will not eat your food, but if you wish to perform a burnt offering to God, you may offer it up." Manoah didn't know that the man was an angel. He only thought he was a man of God. So he asked what the man's name was, so he could honor him when his words came to pass. And the angel replied, "Why are you asking about my name, seeing that it is a wonderful one?" Then Manoah took the young goat and the grain offering, and offered them on a rock to God. And the angel was doing something amazing while Manoah and his wife were looking on, as recorded in verse 19 of chapter 13 in the book of Judges. As the flames from the altar ascended towards the heavens, Jehovah's angel ascended in the flames from the altar. And as Manoah and his wife witnessed this awe-inspiring event, they fell on their faces to the ground, trembling with fear. It was then that Manoah realized he was an angel of God, so he said to his wife, Judges 13:22. 23 declares, Manoah then said to his wife, "We are sure to die, because it is God whom we have just seen." But his wife said to him, "If God wanted to put us to death, he would not have accepted a burnt offering and a grain offering from our hand. He would not have shown us all these things, and he would not have told us any of these things." The woman later gave birth to a son and named him Samson, and as the boy grew, Jehovah continued to bless him, and in time the Spirit of the Lord started to impel him in Mahanedon, between Zorah and Eshtaol. Strengths and exploits. Samson was blessed, and he possessed a supernatural amount of strength, which was a tangible manifestation of the power and presence of God in his life. Despite being set aside by the Lord from birth, the way Samson lived his life didn't really tally with the lives of Nazirites before him, but God still chose to use him. This shows that the Lord can use whoever he pleases, regardless of how you live your life or the kind of person you are. Then Samson went down to Timnah, and he saw a Philistine woman that caught his eye, so he went back and told his parents about the woman he ran into while he was at Timnah, and although she was a Philistine, he asked his father and mother to get her for him as a wife. Judges 14:1-4 declares, "Then Samson went down to Timnah, and in Timnah he saw a Philistine woman. So he went up and told his father and mother, 'In Timnah a Philistine woman caught my eye, and I want you to get her for me as a wife.' But his father and mother said to him, 'Can you not find a woman among your relatives and among all our people? Must you go and take a wife from among the uncircumcised Philistines?' But Samson said to his father, 'Get her for me, because she is the right one for me.' His father and mother did not realize that this was from Jehovah, for he was looking for an opportunity against the Philistines, as the Philistines were ruling over Israel at that time. So Samson went down with his father and mother to Timnah, and he departed from them for a moment, and by the time he approached the vineyards of Timnah, he was attacked by a lion who came roaring at him. Then the Spirit of the Lord came upon him and empowered him, and he tore the lion in two, just as someone tears a young goat in two with his bare hands. But he didn't tell his father and mother what he had done.
When he was on his way back to reunite with his parents, he turned to the side and looked at the dead body of the lion. And in the lion's carcass there was a swarm of bees and honey. So he scraped out the honey into his hands and ate it as he walked along. And as he rejoined his father and mother, he gave them to eat, but he didn't tell them that he had scrapped the honey out of the carcass of a lion. Because this was a violation of one of the Nazirite vows, as found in Numbers 6:6-9, where it says, "He should not approach a dead person during all the days he remains separated from Jehovah. Even if his father or his mother or his brother or his sister should die, he may not defile himself because the sign of his Naziriteship to God is upon his head. He is holy to Jehovah all the days of his Naziriteship. But if someone should suddenly die alongside him and he defines the hair symbolizing his separation from God, he must shave his head on the day he establishes his purification. He should shave it on the seventh day."
Typically stating that a Nazirite must have nothing to do with a dead body, and in this case, the carcass of a lion. His father went down to the woman and Samson held a banquet there, because at that time that was what the young men used to do. And when they saw him, they brought 30 groomsmen to accompany him. Judges 14:11-14 says, "When they saw him, they brought 30 groomsmen to accompany him. Then Samson said to them, 'Please let me tell you a riddle. If during the 7 days of the banquet you will solve it and tell me the answer, I will have to give you 30 linen garments and 30 outfit of clothing. But if you are unable to tell me the answer, you must give me 30 linen garments and 30 outfits of clothing.' They said, 'Tell us your riddle. We want to hear it.' So he said to them, 'Out of the eater came something to eat, and out of the strong came something sweet.' In those days, having a variety of clothes and linen showed value, and it was of great importance, so the bet was difficult to walk away from. However, they were unable to solve the riddle for 3 days, and on the 4th they came up to Samson's wife, whose name was also not recorded in the Bible. And they pressured her into tricking her husband into telling them the answer to the riddle, or else they were going to burn her and her father, because they were angry that they couldn't figure out the answer, and they asked her if their invitation was only a setup to take away their possessions. So Samson's wife wept over him and begged him to tell her the answer to the riddle. She said to him, "You must hate me. You do not love me. You told a riddle to my people, but you have not told the answer to me." Then Samson replied to her, saying, "Why, I have not told it even to my own father and mother. Should I tell it to you?" But she kept crying and weeping over him throughout the course of the 7-day banquet. Samson had become fed up from her constant nagging and pressure, so he told her the answer, which she then relayed back to her people. So on the 7th day of the banquet, before the sun set, the Philistine men approached him with confidence and said to him, "What is sweeter than honey, and what is stronger than a lion?" So Samson replied, "If you had not plowed with my young cow, you would not have solved my riddle." At this point, the Bible recorded that the Spirit of the Lord came upon Samson and empowered him, and he went down to Ashkelon, where he struck down 30 Philistine men and took their clothing and gave the outfits to those who had answered the riddle. He was furious as he went back up to his father's house. After a while, in the days of the wheat harvest, Samson went to go visit his wife. He came along with a young goat. So as he approached the house of his bride, he said, "I wish to go into my wife's bedroom." But her father didn't let him go in. Her father told him that she had been given to one of the groomsmen because he thought Samson must hate her for betraying him and telling the answer of the riddle to her people. But he also offered her little sister to him, stating that she was more attractive. Samson was furious, and he said to them, "This time I cannot be blamed by the Philistines for harming them." So Samson went and caught 300 foxes. Then he took torches, turned the foxes tail to tail, and put one torch between each pair of tails. Then he set fire to the torches and sent the foxes out into the fields of standing grain of the Philistines. He set on fire everything from sheaf to standing grain, as well as the vineyards and the olive groves. This is where I believe Mozilla Firefox got their logo from. Then the Philistines asked who was responsible for this, and they were told that it was Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite, because they took his wife and gave her to his groomsmen. So the Philistine rulers went and burned Samson's wife and her husband,
As Samson learned about what had happened, he was furious, so he vowed not to rest till he had gotten his revenge. So he started striking down Philistine men, one after the other, and it was a great slaughter. After which he went down and stayed in a cave of the crag Etam. So the Philistines came up and camped in Judah and were tramping about in Lehi. And the men of Judah came up to them and asked why they had come up against them. And the Philistines answered, "We have come up to capture Samson, to do to him just as he did to us." So 3,000 men of Judah went down to the cave of crag Etam and said to Samson, "Do you not know that the Philistines are ruling over us? So why have you done this to us?" But Samson told them that he only did to them as they did to him. But the men of Judah told Samson that they came to capture him and hand him over to the Philistines.
At this point, he made them swear to him that they won't harm him. So they told him that they were only going to tie him and hand him over to the Philistines, that they themselves were not going to put him to death. So he cooperated with them, and they tied him with 2 new ropes and brought him up from the crag. When they got to Lehi, the Philistines shouted triumphantly at the sight of him, because it seemed to them that he was captured because he was bound by 2 new ropes. But the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and the ropes became like linen threads that were scorched with fire, and his fetters melted off his hands. Then he found a jawbone of a donkey, and he grabbed it and used it to strike down 1,000 men. When he was done, he threw away the jawbone and called that place Ramathlehi. Then he became thirsty, and he called on Jehovah and said, "It was you who gave this great salvation into the hand of your servant, but now am I to die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised?" So God split open a hollow that was in Lehi, and water flowed from it. When he drank, his spirit returned and was revived. That was why he named the place En-Hak-Kor-A, which is in Lehi to this day. Downfall and redemption. Despite his incredible strength and exploits, Samson had a tragic flaw: his weakness for women and his lack of self-control. This vulnerability is evident in his relationships with 3 women: the Timnite woman, the Philistine woman at Gaza, and Delilah. Samson's weakness was not just his attraction to women, but also his pride and arrogance. He believed he was invincible, that his strength would always bail him out. He ignored the warnings and consequences of his actions, thinking he could outsmart his enemies and his own weaknesses. Judges 16:1-3 says, 1. One time Samson went to Gaza and saw a prostitute there, and he went in to her. 2. The Gazites were told, "Samson has come here." So they surrounded him and lay in ambush for him at the city gate. They stayed quiet the whole night, saying to themselves, "When daylight comes, we will kill him." 3. However, Samson kept lying there until midnight. Then he got up at midnight and grabbed the doors of the city gate and the 2 side posts and pulled them out along with the bar. He put them on his shoulders and carried them up to the top of the mountain that faces Hebron. After that, he fell in love with a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. Then the Philistine leaders approached her and offered her a bribe of 100 pieces of silver each. They asked her to seduce and trick him and find out what makes him so strong and how they can overpower and subdue him. So Delilah approached Samson and asked him the source of his power and what can be used to subdue him. And Samson replied, "If they tie me with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried out, I will grow as weak as an ordinary man." So she told the Philistine leaders and gave them the 7 bowstrings that hadn't been dried, and they laid an ambush for him in the inner room. So as she tied him with it, she told him the Philistines were upon him, and he broke free from the 7 ropes easily. The Philistines didn't come out till they were sure Samson was really subdued. Then Delilah said to him, "Look, you have fooled me and told me lies. Now tell me, please, what can be used to tie you?" So he said to her, "If they tie me up with new ropes that have not been used for work, I will grow as weak as an ordinary man." So Delilah took new ropes and tied him, and then she called out to him and said, "The Philistines are upon you, Samson." All the while the ambush was set in the inner room. At that, he tore them off like threads. Delilah asked him once again what his weakness was, and the 3rd time he told her that, "If you weave 7 braids of my head with the warped thread."
So she waited till he fell asleep and weaved his head 7 braids and fixed them with a pin and told him the Philistines were upon him. And he woke up from his sleep and pulled out the loom pin and the warp thread. She now said to him, "How can you say you love me when your heart is not with me? You have fooled me 3 times, and you have not told me the source of your great power." Day after day she was nagging at Samson because the Philistines were still disturbing her, and she was still very much interested in the silver that they promised her. So Samson grew tired of her nagging, so he finally opened up to her. He said to her, "A razor has never touched my hair, because I am a Nazirite of God from birth. If I am shaved, my power will leave me, and I will grow weak and become like all other men." She noticed he was being sincere this time, so she called out to the Philistines to lay in wait because they had grown tired of the games.
So when Samson was asleep, Delilah shaved his head, and she called out to him that the Philistines were upon him. So he woke up from his sleep, and in his arrogance, he said that he will go out and still shake himself free like he always does, not knowing that the Spirit of God had already left him. So the Philistines came and gouged out his eyes. Then they captured him and brought him down to Gaza, and they bound him with 2 copper fetters, and he became a grinder of grains in the prison. The Philistine leaders then gathered together to offer a sacrifice to Dagon their god to celebrate. When the people saw Samson, they were exclaiming that their God has delivered Samson, their enemy, into their hands, the one who devastated our land and killed so many of us. So in the midst of their celebrations, they called for Samson to be used as entertainment. So they brought him out of the prison and placed him between 2 pillars so everyone could see him and laugh at him. So Samson said to the boy holding him, "Let me feel the pillars that support the house so that I can lean against them." Incidentally, the house was full of men and women. All the Philistine lords were there, and on the roof there were about 3,000 men and women who were looking on while Samson provided amusement. Judges 16:28-31 says, Samson now called out to Jehovah, "Sovereign Lord Jehovah, remember me, please, and strengthen me. Please, just this once, O God, and let me take revenge on the Philistines for one of my 2 eyes." Then Samson braced himself against the 2 middle pillars that supported the house, and he leaned on them with his right hand on one and his left hand on the other. Samson called out, "Let me die with the Philistines." Then he pushed with all his might, and the house fell on the lords and all the people in it. So he killed more at his death than he had killed during his life. Later his brothers and all his father's family came down to take him back. They brought him up and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the tomb of Manoah's father. He had judged Israel for 20 years. Samson's story is a powerful reminder that our strengths and weaknesses are both gifts from God to be used for His purposes and His glory. Despite his flaws and mistakes, Samson remained a beloved servant of God, and his legacy continues to inspire us today. May we learn from his example, humbling ourselves before God and seeking His strength in our own weaknesses. Let us remember that our redemption and restoration are always possible, no matter how dark our circumstances may seem. If this video has helped you, then click that like button, share your thoughts in the comments section, and share it with your Christian friends. Thank you.